Good afternoon. I'm Steve Basnett, and along with Aaron Marsden, I would like to welcome everyone on behalf of CANASA and Security Canada to our online learning session. I would like to say a special thank you to Senstar Corporation for their support and sponsoring today's session. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Andrew Fleck of Senstar. Andrew has been a professional in the Canadian electronic security market for over 10 years. With a focus on perimeter intrusion detection applications, Andrew has managed key accounts across several markets, including corrections, oil and gas, hydro and energy, defense, aviation, and commercial. Andrew studied international business at Algonquin College in Ottawa and business administration with focus on marketing at St. Lawrence College in Kingston. Outside of security, Andrew is a level 4 umpire and instructor evaluator with Softball Canada. Feel free to type any questions you may have for Andrew during the session into the Q&A window at the bottom of your screen, and he will respond during that portion roughly 20 minutes from now. I will now turn the session over to Andrew. Welcome, and thanks for being here, Andrew.
Excellent. Thanks for having me, Steve. I see so many friends of Senstar logging in. So excited to be with you all again. It's been a very, very, very long time. We were all chatting kind of beforehand. It's been quite a fair bit, and I miss you all, and I'm really looking forward to being with you here today. So today we're going to have a quick chat about when to deploy what. And the title is a little misleading in the sense where it says a comparative overview, and we are going to compare things and have a discussion. We're not going to get into the nuts and bolts, but we're going to get into the questions that I answer on a day-to-day basis, the conversations that we have all the time. And the main question is, Andrew, I have XYZ customer, what should I use? And at the end of the day, this kind of comes into a little bit of the mantra that I have on my team is, it's the customer site, but it's our responsibility. And that's the same thing, that message that I'd like to take back to you as the integrator, as the security manager, the end user being the internal customer at the company you work for, a consultant. And there's things that we want to look at. And the things that we really want to look at are more of conditions rather than what technology that we're going to use. We tend to put the cart before the horse many, many times when we talk about perimeter. A lot of key buzzwords we hear, fiber and different things like that. So the main questions I have is I tend to take people back. And first and foremost, we start to look at are we securing a fence or are we not securing a fence? Perimeter can be more than a fence. That's what people also don't come to realize. As commercial properties evolve, we see, especially in the cannabis industry, we see the perimeter being established by the walls. So, we have a wall of a facility sometimes we look at. We have potentially VIP customers who, maybe have a decorative fence and putting something on the fence is obstructive. So again, what are we considering? What is our perimeter? I think as security professionals too, the number one statement we all have when we begin to look at incidents on the perimeter or how we secure our facility is we stop and we look at the lighting. Answer to number one, create lighting. But the world's different. Putting up a light's not as easy as it used to be. There's many different factors we have to consider now. Another big thing that we have to talk about is egress points. Are we looking at gates? Or do we not have gates? Do we have just fence? Do we have pedestals? What do we have? And then most importantly, these are the things that we don't stop when we consider when we look at a fence sensor. And there's some of the things that we should look at the most. And the first one is, what existing infrastructure is there? What infrastructure are we going to need? Secondly, after we look at the infrastructure, the budget has to come into effect. Always, always, always. Infrastructure can be a very intrusive thing when it comes to the perimeter. And that's one of the things I noticed in my career at Senstar. It's not the cost of the hardware. It's what it costs to potentially add some of the things or deploy it. And then lastly, what are the operating costs? And this goes down and looks at many different things. So we'll look at total cost of ownership as well. So first and foremost, those of you that chat with me regularly, that the first words out of my mouth most time are flex zone. And the reason why flex zone is so reliable and comes out of my mouth is it truly is an industry favor. Copper fence sensors are, in my opinion, probably the most consumed form of perimeter in Canada. We see it from Senstar that flex zone is miles ahead of our other perimeter lines. Some of the other ones coming, are starting to climb their way up as technologies evolve. But always copper fence sensors are going to be the most cost effective and, in my opinion, some of the most reliable as well too. I stop and I look at ranging fence sensors that are on the market, and that's what Senstar offers, and that's what FlexZone would be. That's our latest generation. And we stop and we look at the viability of what does ranging truly mean. And this is where I want to start to have a little bit of a chat with people and start to talk about what does a smart fence really mean. And people stop and they think, hey, Andrew, knowing that someone comes in at meter 152 is one of the most attractive things that they know. At the end of the day, the fact that somebody, breaches a perimeter at meter 152, it's not really something that's going to bring us that value that we're looking for. Now, where does knowing that meter 152 goes off? This goes off from a maintenance standpoint, from an integrator, receiving nuisance alarms, false alarms. It could also be for the fact that we have a guard that's receiving false alarms all the time. And we all know that one of the biggest deterrents to fence sensors has been false alarms. Guards shut them off. Well, if we know that we have a continuous alarm at 152, maybe that guard on their foot patrol can have a walk and see maybe a bag blew into the fence. So these are some of the reasons why me personally, I tend to see that copper fence sensors are one of the more attractive. As well too, the price of them they've just come to a point where they're actually becoming a consumable product. And then lastly, the last thing to consider with a fence sensor, and especially a copper fence sensor, why I lean to them, is the ease of repairability. And let's look at the applications on why we would look at that. If I have a logistics yard or I have a delivery yard where we know that we have numerous vehicles going up and backing into a fence, damage to the fence can sometimes be a resistance to using a fence sensor. The way that a copper fence sensor can be rapidly repaired, especially flex zone using our splice kits, competitors have many different other ways to repair their cable, is very quick, very cost effective, and you can have your fence up and going. Again, this comes back to one of the benefits of ranging as well too. Damage to a fence is not what it used to be as well. Yes, we still are always looking for that fence to be in fantastic condition. However, the integrity of the fence is not as big as it used to be. So then where do we go next? The next place that we tend to see at Senstar, but we see the next evolution of fence sensors is intelligent lighting. And this is a product that's very unique to Senstar Corporation. This is a real live footage photo that we've taken from a site here in Ottawa. It's a confidential site, but we had an end user that go ahead and they allowed us to use some of the photos for marketing. And what we're looking at here now is this concept of how do I bring light into my perimeter, but also how do I minimize light pollution? And one of the reasons why I really go to this photo is if we stop and we look in the right in the corner over here, we see the sheer amount of light pollution coming off of these HPS lights. Now we look at what the LM100 is doing, providing that directed carpet lighting. What it's going to do is it's going to go ahead and provide that visual deterrence to our intruder to let them know we're watching our facility. Secondly, though, and where we're seeing a lot of attraction for this, and especially in the critical infrastructure market, is the fact that there's no light pollution. It's a dark sky certified approved product. Light pollution is becoming one of the big factors in this industry as well. But as we both know, anytime that we go ahead and deploy perimeter, it's only as good as the lighting we have around it to use that footage. But what are some of the other advantages to intelligent lighting? Some of them are as well that we can put them on a schedule. I could go ahead and I could potentially run it at a lower threshold just to say that I'm monitoring the area, and then increase it when I have an intrusion. So again, we're giving that flexibility back to the customer, showing a little bit of intelligence, a little bit of innovation. So one of the things that we need to talk about too and consider when we look at our perimeter is the gates or egress points. How we secure them is not always the biggest issue, but the biggest issue is always what type of gate we have. And that's where the conversations tend to go. Most people who do business with me tend to know that if we have any form of swinging or pedestrian gate, I tell everybody to go ahead and use the fence sensor cable. The main reason why we go ahead and we do that is the fence sensor cable can go ahead and it can adjust and it can handle the open and bend of a swing gate. Normally as well too, a swing gate is not as frequently used as well, so the movement on the cable is a little easier. But sliding gates tend to become where we have the issue. There's many different issues in them because affixing fence cable to the fence is one of the worst solutions that we can do on a sliding gate. Fence cable is not designed to be recoiled. There's a center conductor in it and they break. That's the reality. It's not designed to be retracted. So then how do we look at a sliding gate? Cable management becomes the biggest factor because we still have to continue cable underneath our gate. This is normally for a power aspect or potentially the continuation of the sensor cable. But what we do see is that putting in pedestals or adding microwaves or IR beams are a very costly addition to a project. There's a time when these products tend to fit well, but the majority of the time, using a wireless gate sensor is a fantastic solution. It's a very reliable solution. We offer them in battery and solar power. As well, there's other variations on the market that aren't just Senstar. One of the reasons I stay away from microwaves and IR beams is the impact from environment. They do provide, though, an added level of security that sensor cable and the wireless gate sensor do not, is that if the gate is left open, the microwave will provide an additional line of detection and alarm. So we've talked about the classic Senstar sensors. Now, the one that we did leave out was OmniTrack, but I know some people are going to come in and ask about buried cable. So I'm just going to give you a quick 2-second on that rather than have a slide. There are only 2 applications that I've ever used buried cable in my 7-year career at Senstar. The primary consumer of buried cable in Canada is Correctional Services Canada. It's a correctional product because it's used between the 2 layers of the fencing should somebody go over the first line and the FDS or the FDS goes down. The other application where I see buried cable used is for heads of state or extremely high VIP customers who do not want to know if there's a security system deployed or there's an aesthetics feature. So these are things that you're seeing on embassies or potentially a celebrity or a billionaire. These are the only 2 applications in my 7 years that I've seen this. We sell potentially in Canada 2 buried cable systems a year, but I'm only speaking to Canada. Globally, buried cable is still used in a lot of different applications, but in Canada, it just isn't consumed. So next, I want to talk about a different way on how we can secure our perimeter, and that's by using software. Many people are not aware that Senstar actually acquired a VMS company in 2016, and we brought the iMetis banner underneath the Senstar group of companies. iMetis is no more, but the Symphony product still lives on, and Symphony is a world-class analytic product. So sometimes a fence sensor doesn't make sense, or potentially a customer doesn't have the budget and we want to go ahead and we want to leverage existing infrastructure that's there. Some of the fantastic things about outdoor analytics is that they've evolved. They are becoming more stable than they once were. I will be honest, in my opinion, I do find a perimeter, a hardwired sensor still more reliable, but analytics have evolved. Some of the core analytics at Senstar that we would recommend that you would use to secure a basic perimeter would be using something like potentially cross-line detection or license plate recognition at your gate or entry point. As well, we have outdoor object tracking to potentially follow vehicles in a loading bay or maybe have employees that are going around late at night. So we have a couple different analytics that we would look for that way. One of the keys, though, to analytics is we have to keep in mind is that we require unobstructed visibility. And at times, especially in Canada, as the weather turns, this can always be a bit of an issue. Weather is not the friend of a perimeter solution, no matter what it is. However, though, as I've said, analytics have come along, and even a lot of the other different technologies as well. In addition, the low light capabilities and the addition of thermal has really changed how we can use analytics and cameras on the perimeter. So when I talk about the use of analytics or thermal or fence sensors, what I really want to talk about is something that a presentation I saw many, many years ago. It was the first one I ever saw when I came to Senstar. It was put on by our VP of APAC now, Gord Loney. And he said something on the slide, and essentially the long and the short of it was, a perimeter sensor on its own is utterly useless. A camera system on its own is utterly useless. However, when I harmonize these products together, that's when I reduce false alarms. And I think that's where we're at in today's world, that we didn't realize we would get there so quickly and at such a cost-effective standpoint. So a couple of different applications now where I'd like to talk about this rather than the technologies themselves, but applications where I see this of value is essentially I want to use the cartoon that's in the corner. So what we see right now is we see an example where the LM100 is on the fence as a line of perimeter detection. As well, maybe we're using a thermal camera, or potentially we're using a standard fixed camera that's using an object tracking to find people. What we see right now is we have a customer who actually runs the LM100 in a residential area at about a 30% illumination during a set standard hours where the sun goes down. They then go ahead and they use the thermal cameras or analytics to catch any type of motion that's in front of the fence, and then they illuminate the fence to 100%. This turns around and it gives them the greatest capabilities that they have. Now, what they do, though, is they don't declare that an alarm. Now what they do is they actually wait for the LM100 to actually activate, because the LM100 has an accelerometer built into it. It is a perimeter sensor and it is a light. It is not a motion detector. So we do need to use video if we want to turn around and look for motion. So that's the one thing I do want to convey to everybody. There's no motion sensing capabilities in the light whatsoever. But then when we receive that alarm, this LM100 luminaire that would be here would strobe. This is now when we know we have an actual alarm and we can begin our security operations procedures. Again, this could be the same thing where maybe I don't arm my fence sensor during working hours. I have it completely disarmed. However, if I feel that I catch motion inside a certain area, I then begin to arm the fence sensor. There's many different applications, but turning around and leveraging the different technologies to weed out false alarms is how we build our security systems stronger and get us to the point that our customers have faith in what the technology we've deployed. So the last thing that I want to talk about is total cost of ownership. And we've used this pictorial down here looking kind of at what the LM100 is in a lighting world. But what I really want to talk about is the fact of what TCO truly means in my eyes. Maybe not so much of what everyone else has said in my eyes. What we tend to see on a day-to-day basis is the conversation about how do I get to the lowest price point to win the bid or to win the customer. The reality is the upfront costs of the equipment are not always the answer to what makes something the best solution. The amount of time we take to deploy something is a big factor in what we turn around and recommend as well. As a prime example, anytime a perimeter exceeds 4 kilometers in Canada, I immediately begin to look at fiber. And that's because the ease of deployment of fiber optic, the time that we now save outweighs the extreme cost delta between a copper fence sensor and a perimeter fence sensor. Another time where I turn around and I look at what the cost of using maybe a certain sensor would be is when I'm talking to a customer who's looking at deploying lights, and not just ones on the building. Maybe they're going to sink a ballast. What is the cost of that? And I don't just mean putting the lights up, depending on the customer. What are your permit costs? What are the risks if we breach the ground? Any of you who do nuclear, as you can imagine, we do a lot of that. Talking about breaching the ground is the worst thing that one can ever say. It can almost end your conversation. So we begin to start to look at what are all these different costs and factors that make total cost of ownership. Is it the amount of servers we need? Is it the amount of manpower? How many times do I have to maintain it? What is its life cycle? So TCO is numerous things that we need to start to take into more consideration, I find, in the industry. We're always still trying to chase that bottom dollar to be low bid or to win that job. And yes, there are times where that's the case. But if we stop and we look at the solution of what we're trying to deploy throughout our bid and the time we're saving, sometimes we can see what a more cost-effective solution is. So the last thing that I kind of wanted to talk about today was just to summarize everything, was to talk about how, yes, perimeter is overwhelming. Yes, the Senstar product portfolio is overwhelming. Yes, this is I just scraped the top and we can talk about this for hours. But the message that I want to come out of here today is the requirements are more important than the technology, and the technology is more important than the cost. So when we stop and we look at all these different things, when we get together to start to talk about the solution, let's begin to look about the customer and let's consider what is our responsibility and then work together to bring a solution. By reaching out to experts at Senstar or other different people in the field, we can work with you from the beginning to turn around and to kind of bring that thing full circle for your customer and make sure that they understand the total cost of ownership, but have a stable solution that reduces false alarms. I just want to thank everyone for your time today, and I'm really looking forward to some questions and getting interactive with you guys. I've missed you all very, very much, so please come at me with your best. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, Andrew. That was great. If anyone has any questions, please type them into your Q&A window now. Although don't come at them with anything too hard to pronounce for my sake. So we get our first question here for Andrew. What kind of perimeter sensor has the lowest nuisance alarm rate?
So that's a very difficult question to ask. This is a question, a comment I have numerous times. I say beauty is the eye of the beholder. There's no such thing to say one product is going to guarantee to provide less false alarms than the other. And that's one of the things we were hoping to talk on today, was recognizing that conditions cause false alarms more so than technology. When we understand the conditions that we're using, what the customer's end goal is, then we could turn around and we can then select what could probably have the least amount of false alarms for that customer. As an example, I have a customer in Southern Ontario right on Lake Ontario. They want to know that every time the wind hits the fence is an alarm. They don't call that a false alarm. So again, beauty is the eye in the beholder. Let's reach out to me. Let's have a chat about the site and the customer's needs.
Great, thank you. Next question. What is the best technology to use in extreme temperatures, like very hot and very cold?
So temperatures are a big consideration in all kinds of different aspects. We want to look at ice, we want to look at water. The great part about the Senstar portfolio is everything is -40 plus 70 rated. We actually design and test everything right here in Ottawa. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the climate in Ottawa, I'll just give you a rough example. We got 25 centimeters of snow yesterday and it's -19 today. So we test our products in very reliable conditions. Again, let's look at what are the conditions of the site, where will there be snow buildup, where is the wind, where are all these different things. And again, we can come in and settle things down. However, though, in my experience, those that know me well, 9 times out of 10, I'm going to come back with FlexZone for most applications.
Okay, thanks. Our next question, is there a sorry, yeah, they did get me and it was an easy word. Is there a certification required for an installing technician?
So it all depends on the type of product that you go to use. So example, FlexZone and LM100 are products that are available in distribution. We have simple training videos available on our YouTube channel. It's broken down into 7 parts for FlexZone, I believe 6 for LM100, maybe 8. They take about 30 minutes. However, there are formal certification processes because clients that consume perimeter may have an internal requirement that you be trained by the factory. So from a commercial application, we've definitely made the product cost effective and consumable for self-storage yards, boat marinas, all those different stuff. But for those of you chasing government of Canada applications or potentially high-end users, yes, there's a formal certification that will go ahead and support you. Fiber patrol, buried cable, you must be certified, and you can only purchase that directly by speaking with Senstar.
Great, thank you. Our next question, what is the best technology to achieve high FOV and high range detection at night?
So high range detection at night is always the most fantastic way to look at it. It all depends on exactly what we're looking at. If I'm looking at movement inside a logistics yard compared to the perimeter itself, a combination of a low light camera using analytics is going to be my best solution there. When I'm looking at the perimeter itself for verification, if I have a little bit of light that's existing and I have good quality low light cameras, we could potentially stick with a standard fence sensor. However, we also have the LM100 for some of these applications, and that's where I would tend to lean for. Now, one of the great things about Senstar's technology is you can actually use them in conjunction. So the LM100, it may be a bit of a price point for someone to do a whole 2-kilometer perimeter, but because maybe only 500 meters is where we don't have light. Well, I could deploy light across that 500 meters, and then I could use a sensor cable across the rest. So again, the message is coming in, not so much what's the technology, but what's my site and what's my application.
Great, thank you. Okay, and we do have time for at least one more question. So what about the cost of installation? Which of these products has the lowest cost and which has the highest cost for installation?
So the highest cost is always buried cable. It's in its own league by itself. The cost of it is never with the equipment, is with the civil cost, third-party cost to breach the ground, remove soil, et cetera, et cetera. So buried cable is its own league. Fiber patrol can tend to be a little bit pricey, but the further you go, it rapidly decreases itself. LM100, again, is kind of middle of the pack, but it tends to stay pretty consistent anywhere between kind of $50 US to $65 US a meter. Again, the higher side being the shorter perimeter. FlexZone is always the most cost effective. It ranges anywhere from $10 a meter to $30 a meter, so it's extremely cost effective.
Okay, and we just had one more come in, so we'll try to sneak that through. Regulators for many industries are typically slow to adapt new technology. Is Senstar making any efforts to encourage adaptation and acceptance of video analytics in the regulated critical infrastructure market? You want me to read that one again, or?
No, I got that one.
Okay.
I definitely got that. It's something we go at a fair bit. Yes, anytime there's a regulatory body involved, they are very, very slow to adapt. However, critical infrastructure, I find that they move at a faster speed compared to most. Example, one of the ones I find the slowest to adapt due to the risk involved is nuclear. I find that the CNSC, they're the most leery. They're the most nervous out of everybody. Prisons, they're very leery as well. However, the critical infrastructure market, they recognize that they need change. They are on a timeline for change. They are looking at a liability risk more so than what the perimeter and vandalism risks are, because the main thing that's happening in the critical infrastructure world is people going over and touching live coils, and we have actual deaths. We have these in Ontario. We have these in every part of Canada. It's a very real thing. And believe it or not, for those of you that go at the utility market right now, crime is up very, very high for these customers. Copper theft is on a rise, as you can imagine. When people are out of their jobs, the first thing that goes up is crime, and copper is one of them. But we see some very foolish people touching some things they shouldn't. Senstar works regularly with with critical infrastructure bodies around the world. I've presented at IPSAG myself. We do have people that speak with the NERC Commission as well, and we speak with numerous end users on a daily basis, helping to get them to that goal as well.
Great. Well, okay, that brings us to the end of today's session. Thank you for joining us. And once again, thank you to Andrew and to Senstar for their support. At the end of today's session, there will be a log on for next week's session, so please sign up. We look forward to seeing you next week. Until then, be well.